Hi everyone, good afternoon. Sorry I couldn't be there today. I'm with the softball team and we're playing a playoff game, okay? So wish us luck. So just a reminder, right, to make sure you listen to the supply teacher's instructions. Please everyone, there's a maximum of 2 students per desk. If any staff asks you to move for any reason, or let's just say you're getting a little bit too chatty or something like that, please just follow their instructions. Don't put up a fuss. Follow instructions and just move quickly and quietly, okay? Remember, you don't have a right to distract others. Everyone has a right to a good learning environment where they can hear everything and where they can kind of copy things in peace and quiet, okay? So please, let's keep it nice and quiet. Let's keep it respectful. And also remember to be flexible and be patient with each other. Okay, I'm really hoping to get a good report from whoever is supply teaching. Okay, so we're going to be doing disappearing frogs because frogs are really great indicators of how the ecosystem is doing. But I just wanted to let you know, I just wanted to show you something a little bit extra, okay? So about 10 years ago or so, there was actually a nuclear meltdown in a nuclear facility in Fukushima, which is in Japan, okay? And so shortly after this, they were noticing, for example, that a lot of the animals were starting to mutate, okay? So just in case we don't know what that looks like, here we go. Here are some pictures, okay? So this here is a regular butterfly, okay? But at the bottom here, we see the wings are stunted in their growth, okay? And you can imagine also that this makes it very difficult for the butterflies to fly, okay, for example, okay? Over here, okay, this is, for example, a shipment of fish, okay, and there could be some possible radiation, okay. One of the issues that they were finding with the fish is that even though they're supposed to be this color, okay, so kind of like this gray, the scales on a fish are supposed to be gray in color, they were finding actually that some of the fish were getting mutated fish were actually developing transparent scales. Okay, transparent scales, which is really interesting too. Okay, so mutations. Okay, and then over here, salmon around Fukushima, that nuclear power plant, okay, this is the regular size of salmon, and they're finding that they were growing much, much faster. So the fish that were exposed to radiation were growing much faster, okay? So these are just examples of how some animals have started to mutate. Okay, and here I'm just going to show you some pictures of frogs and toads as well, okay? So here are some regular frogs that are probably found in some rainforest, the brightly colored ones, okay? So these are kind of like the more regular looking ones, how you would find them in nature. They're all sorts of different colors. They're quite beautiful. Sometimes they're poisonous, right? Okay, and these are toads. Another toad who's smiling at us. Okay, oops, sorry, give me a second. And toad as well. Okay. Okay, so now we're starting to see some mutated toads, okay? So over here, it's missing a leg. This one is mutated because it has extra legs, okay? So frogs are very sensitive. Okay. So you're starting to see how, okay, these are like the extra legs on an x-ray scan even. Okay, pretty crazy, right? Okay, really interesting. This is maybe a tadpole because it still has its tail. Okay, I don't know what's wrong with this one. There we go. One with an extra eye, so very Simpsons-esque. Okay. Okay, so over here, let's not worry about this, sorry. Okay, so now back to our notes now that you kind of have an idea of what these disappearing or mutated frogs look like. Okay, so let's start taking down some notes. Everyone make sure you have a pencil and that you're copying down. Okay, so please, I'm going to go through this kind of quickly and just read through it, but obviously you can tell the teacher just to pause the video at any time, and then you can catch up. Okay, so amphibians have lived on this planet for over 400 million years. Okay, that's a long time. However, scientists have noticed that frogs and other amphibians, okay, so everyone say amphibians, amphibians. Okay, so amphibians are animals that live on both land and water. So sometimes we talk about in the Army, for example, we talk about amphibious vehicles. Those are vehicles that can go on land and water. Okay, so they've been noticing that frogs and other amphibians have started to disappear. It is now estimated that 30% of America's frogs and toads are in trouble. Why? Okay, so please copy those notes down. You can pause at any time. Okay, I'm going to move on though. Okay, so scientists believe that frogs are indicators of the health of the ecosystems they live in. Okay, so the reason why they are indicators, indicators meaning that they indicate something, they show or they reveal something. Okay, so frogs, and this is because, so frogs are really great indicator species because they have two lives. Okay, so they have life in water because at first, when they first hatch, they begin their lives as eggs and then they grow into tadpoles, right, in the water. Then they have life on land where they grow into adult frogs. Okay, so they live in both, when they're frogs, they live as in both land and water areas as well. Okay, so this makes them a really great indicator species because they're actually part of two different areas. Okay, so the other reason why is because frogs have incredibly thin skin. So since it's so thin, it's very easy for pollutants to absorb or enter into the frog. Okay, and then when they absorb these pollutants or the radiation, because their skin is so thin, that's when you start to see some of those mutations that I showed you. Okay, okay, let's keep copying. Okay, frogs in their ecosystems. Since frogs have two lives, they are part of two food chains or systems. Okay, so yesterday we talked about food chains and food webs and how they're all interconnected. Because they have these two different lives, it's really great for seeing how land food webs and also water food webs become affected, okay, or food chains. Okay, so during the tadpole stage, frogs are herbivores because they eat large amounts of plant-like organisms called algae. Okay, so if you remember, herbivores are consumers that eat only plants. Okay, they're kind of like vegetarian, but the word vegetarian is not an ecological term. The term that we want to use is herbivores. Okay, and they eat large amounts of plant-like organisms called algae. Can everyone say algae? Algae. Okay, next up, so after they are tadpoles, then they become adults. So then frogs become carnivores. Okay, they become carnivores, and if you remember, carnivores mean that they consume other animals. Okay, or like insectivorous carnivores, but whatever. Okay, they eat insects and also some small fish. Okay, so another instance of why they're really great indicators, because they're actually part of different food chains. Okay, let's next just take a look at this part over here. So they start off as eggs, then they have tadpole, then they become tadpoles with gills. That means like their lungs are on the outside. Then as the tadpole grows up, they have internal gills. That means kind of like their lungs are on the inside. Then they start to grow their limbs. Okay, this is with hind limb buds. So they kind of like start to bud out some legs. And then over here, there's some hind legs. So it's looking a little bit more frog-like. Okay, and as it goes through its cycle, now the tadpole still has its tail, but it also has some legs. At this stage here, when the tail shortens, it's called a young metamorph, and then later on, then it becomes the adult frog that we usually see. Okay, that we see on land. Okay, so this is the life cycle of a frog from egg to young adult frog. Okay, okay, let's keep copying. I know some of you are probably complaining, okay, and everyone, I know that this is quite a bit of copying, but just remember, you're here to be a student, okay? So this is your job. Your job is to like take down notes, to listen and learn, okay? Even though it's sometimes challenging. Okay, let's keep going. So, why are frogs disappearing? So, the case of the disappearing frogs. Many organisms, such as frogs, are slowly disappearing off the face of the planet. There are 4 reasons why. Okay, so there's the loss of habitat. So a habitat is the place where an organism lives. So it's kind of like the home of the organism. Okay, so where do frogs live? Well, oh my goodness, frogs live on both land and water. So if there's a problem with either land or water, either way they get affected. So they're actually they're much more vulnerable. Not only do they have the thin skin that absorbs the pollutants, but they also will, because they live in 2 different habitats, they can be affected by either one of them. Okay, so frogs need wetlands, ponds, or lakes with clean water to breed. Okay, so what does breeding mean? Breeding means to have babies. Okay, so the water must be clean in order for them to lay their eggs. Okay, next up, they also need forests and fields to survive. Okay, so over here we have a picture of this mutated frog, right? Just like what we saw before. So why is this happening? There's some different reasons why. Okay, and actually we see kind of more of it over here, okay? But one of the reasons why is because in terms of like how human activities are destroying their habitat is because of pollution. Okay, pollution is number 1. Number 2 is forestry or cutting down trees. Okay, so if a frog lives in a forest and we start to cut down the forest, you're basically cutting down and destroying their home. Okay, next up, we're also getting rid of their habitat because of houses, buildings, roadways, parking lots, whatever, okay? And pollution is also destroying a lot of their natural habitat as well, as I mentioned, okay? Next up, number 2. So the first one was loss of habitat. The second one is because of air and water quality. Okay, so frogs breathe in oxygen through their lungs and also their skin. So they actually breathe through their skin. Their skin is very thin, so pollutants from the air and water are easily absorbed into their bodies. This pollution accumulates in their bodies and eventually it kills them. Okay? Next up, as well, poor air and water quality leads to acid rain. Acid rain causes frogs to have fewer eggs, okay? Because I think what happens is that the acidity actually breaks down the membrane of the eggs. That means like the protective layer around the eggs, and it makes it easier for the eggs to die. It can also be that they get reproductive issues so that they don't have as many eggs or they have problem breeding at all. Okay? Next up, it could also be that the frog embryo, so after they're born or after they, the embryos, which is kind of like when they're babies, okay, they develop much slower. Okay, so this is another category of air and water quality and how it affects the frogs. Okay, and then next up, there's also UV or ultraviolet radiation. Okay, so there's UV radiation from the sun. So the amount of UV radiation reaching the earth is increasing because the ozone is being damaged by human activity. Okay, and then lastly, number 4, humans are slowly increasing the temperature of the earth when we release CO2 in the air. This is known as global warming, and frogs are affected by this climate change. Okay, so I have a feeling that this took quite a long time to copy, okay? If this was the case, don't worry. We're not going to do this homework, okay? But I do want you, if you haven't already done so, we can also just watch some disappearing frogs videos to end off before you have to leave for the end of class. Okay, everyone? Take care, and I'll see you next class. Bye!